As a coach now, it's probably share the knowledge, because that's just going to help you again and make you better. Don't be scared to have a journey. Everybody wants the year now straight away, and start your career and be happy with yourself. What I loved about cricket is that you needed each other in the team context, but you had to perform as an individual. My experience from professional rugby was just that there was 14 provinces, so suddenly we all had a chance to compete at the same level. You've got to have that personality, but know when to be serious as well. And then Henry Honeyball came to me in the change room. He said, "Now talking is over." And you just realize, geez, you have to perform today. You pick the person before the player. The player you can coach, but if he's not the right person for the team, then you're going to struggle. Keep going. Believe in yourself. There's a difference between believing and doing. You have to put in the hard yards.
Everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast. Today we sit down with Dan van Zyl, a multi-sport athlete who played both professional cricket and rugby, earning his Springbok cap in 2000. From a Loftus ball boy to touring with the Boks during the early years of professionalism, Dan's journey is filled with unique stories about balancing two sports, life in Super Rugby, and what it meant to finally wear the green and gold. After his playing days, he spent over a decade with Leinster shaping coaches and players, and now runs Rugby Academy Ireland, creating new pathways for young talent. This conversation is about resilience, transition, and the power of mentorship in rugby and life. Dan, brother, great to have you. How are you doing, my man?
Geez, good, Rono. Thanks for that intro. It is a life journey, as you explained there, but no, great to be on the cast with yourself and Ben. Thanks for the opportunity.
Also, Dan, I just wanted to say, huge fan of you and followed you when I was younger. You were playing back in the day. So, those years between 95 and 2000, that's when I really became obsessed with rugby. And I remember you playing for the Stormers when I still support them. Clearly don't support them anymore. But that's another topic. But Ben, man, how are you doing? You had an unbelievable weekend, apparently. You were in nature doing challenges and all bunch of crazy stuff.
I went away with my youngest son to this festival. It's the second year we've been Gone Wild Festival in Devon, and you go and you camp and you do all outdoor pursuits. So we were, like I said in the last pod, we were running, jumping, shooting things, scrambling, So I got a bit carried away. I've got scrapes all over me. It was brilliant. It was just like sniping and stalking, and it was amazing. So I got back. Bit sleep debt, but all good. Excited for this today as well.
Yeah, but Ben, just maybe our audience, you guys maybe see my eyes are slightly red. I didn't have too many brandies, so don't stress about that. I actually had a big high rock session this morning, got stuck into it, and I was down in the trenches and felt like my good old self, suffering. I always say there's those 3 mental challenges when you do a session. It's in the beginning, getting started, and when you're halfway through, you don't want to finish. And then at the end, when you have to pack away the weight, I hate that part. It's probably the worst part. But anyway, going off topic, Dan, it's great to have you. Looking forward to chatting and learning more about your journey, and a huge privilege to speak to you. We always start our podcast off with the simple question: what is the one lesson from the game that you have learned from your career that you can share with our young rugby players and aspiring coaches?
Well, for me, it is as a coach now, it's probably sharing. I think that's something that I intend to do, share the knowledge, because that's just going to help you again and make you better. And then as a player, don't be scared to have a journey. Everybody wants the year now straight away, and it takes you on so many different paths and so on. My own career, probably a great example, but live the journey. Everybody wants to be a pro rugby player now, or straight out of school, or so on. But, why not at 27, 28, 29 start your career and be happy with yourself. I'm a big believer in you've always got to be happy, and you've got to find that place, and that place might not be at home. It might be somewhere else. So don't be scared of the journey. Embrace it.
No, it's actually funny you said that, Dan, because in my community, which you just joined, one of the members actually said it's kind of funny. He's watching the rugby, the Women's Rugby World Cup, and you see the ladies are constantly smiling. On the field, they're smashing each other, but they are smiling. They're enjoying themselves. When you look at the men playing, they're always so serious all the time. I think it's because we're constantly under pressure, and it just resonates what you just said there. You got to enjoy the journey. You got to enjoy every single moment. That is very important.
Today's Lessons from the Game episode was possible thanks to the support of Harris Begley Financial Planning, headed up by former Blackheath player Matt Begley. They are the experts to speak to for tailored advice on investments, mortgages, insurance and pensions, helping you plan for a future of financial security. So when you think money, think Harris Begley and head to www.harrisbegley.co.uk. Approver Quilter Financial Services Limited and Quilter Mortgage Planning Limited, March 2025.
But then I want to go back to your roots. The back in the day at Loftus, you were a ball boy. But most importantly, you were a cricket player and a rugby player at the same time. That must have been intense. I had a short stint at cricket at my younger days, got called up for the first team under 13. And my first over, I bowled 6 wides, and I never played again. So, that's my cricket background. But yeah, so maybe give us some insights. Your days as a ball boy, what was that like at Loftus way back? We won't give away your age there. But then also in terms of, your experience as a rugby player and a cricket player.
Yeah, look, it is going back quite a few years, but ball boy at Loftus started. My dad was involved in refereeing. And so on. Back in the day, he played Carlton when he studied, and had a few mates of college, the famous Billy Katz, who was Springbok hooker at the time and played a lot for over 100 games in those days for Northern Transvaal. So that's how I started. And I was a ball boy probably from the age of 7, and you got £2 on a Saturday being ball boy from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock when the Currie Cup games were finished. But was that till about 16 years of age, and loved that, being close to everybody and didn't have to pay to go and watch the games and see your heroes grow up. So and then the cricket was the same. Lived next to the cricket field since I was a youngster. Again, Dad played. Whistlerkus was our club there at the zoo in Pretoria. It's no longer there. But that was an old student club for anybody that studied at Pretoria College of Education, NKP as it was. And just lived there, started playing cricket there, was lucky enough to play Perm Week in primary school, didn't play Craven Week rugby in primary school or high school. And then, in high school, played 4 years of Nuffield Week. I did after matric, I was a early bird in matric. I was 17 in final year in school and got a call up to Palaborwa Infantry and for military service and decided I don't know if that is for me, so I'm going to try and get another year out of school. So then couldn't speak a word of English, to be honest, but through Nuffield cricket, met a few English players, or the cricket fraternity back then was very English. And then got a scholarship to go to St. Albans College to do a post-matric in St. Albans, and that probably gave me the ins of cricket, where I got coached professionally by Bob Capel, who was the cricket professional there. So I had 4 years of Nuffield cricket, still playing rugby as well. Then went to Pretoria University, played under 20s or under 19s as it was there. We had 3 teams, under 20A, 20B and 19As, that all competed in the main league as it was back then. But a lot of people would say that I was a better cricketer than rugby player. Made my debut for Northern Transvaal against the English touring side Worcester when I was still in school, standard 9. And then I was always part of the bigger squad, never really breaking through until probably at university. At rugby wise as well, didn't play Craven Week, didn't play Northern Transvaal under 20s. And, Tux, as I said, I played under 19 the 1 year, played under 20 the 2nd year, and then the 3rd year, the trial teams came out around February or so, and I was in team number 6 or number 7 for the trials, and I said, listen, not to be arrogant or so on, but I'm not going to play hostel league rugby. I'm going to go back to my dad's club where I grew up, next to the field and so on. Went there to Oostlikes on a Thursday night, played thirds on the weekend, played seconds the following weekend, played first, and in the same year played Northern Transvaal as a 20-year-old. So that's why I say, you have to sometimes go for what you believe in yourself as well, but you've got to find that own path, and whether that's in your country, and we'll probably speak later about how I turned up in Ireland, but yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question, but rugby and cricket has always been next to each other, and I did judo as well. Was lucky enough to present South Africa junior level at judo against France and Israel and America. So it gave me a good sense of individual sport, of team sport, and your role within that. So, but still today, a lot of people will say I was a better cricketer than rugby player, but Nick Mallet and Alan Solomon's changed that.
Okay, but Dan, it's great you just touched base, and Ben and myself a while back, we spoke about the importance of multi-sports for young players developing in their skill set. So how did cricket impact your rugby game? How did that help you, the skills you learned in cricket, help you to become a better rugby player? And obviously you did judo as well, so there's a massive, the big benefits of doing combat sports. But cricket, what impact did that have on you as a rugby player?
Look, I think it's also the difference in mindset. In rugby, everybody's together and everything is about the team, but you can have a knock on and, okay, then we got to get the props to scrum. Or you can miss a kick at post, but it's not the end of your involvement. You've got 80 minutes that you can involve. What I loved about cricket is that you were so you needed each other in the team context, but you had to perform as an individual, and that later in rugby, played a huge part in how successful I got probably in rugby, because you realized, listen, there might not be another chance. Every face counts. Every ball that you face counts. Every ball that you bowl, it counts. So I became again, it's the mindset for me was the thing, and I just loved different environments. Like the change room atmosphere was totally different. In rugby, you could, not that I was the most physical player, but you could physically do something to someone, when in rugby you had to in cricket you had to sledge him and get into his mind, so I really enjoyed that part. So I was very, very fortunate, grew up with, as I say, great guys, was involved in great teams, always the youngster, and I learned how to deal with disappointment as well, because I benched a lot in rugby. In those days it was only 2 guys on the bench when I started playing for Northern Transvaal as it was. And then in the cricket, I was not good enough as a 4-day cricketer, but I was a very specialized one-day cricketer that could do all three formats of the game. And in saying that now, it makes me think I was never a goal kicker in rugby, but because the three formats of cricket, bowling, batting, fielding, which I proud myself on, I was always selected for a one-day team. But I wasn't a specialist in any of those to be just picked for that area in a 4-day game, for instance. But then when I came to my rugby, and back then it was US van der Westhuizen and Avernus Swanepoel in the Carlton League in Pretoria, I think we were 8 scrum halves that all played provincial at the end, and 3 became Springboks and 1 played for Namibia. So the competition then was so fierce that how do you get better than somebody else? And it was impossible to be better than yours. So how can you get yourself into teams and so on? So I started goal kicking, and that discipline of the cricket, be a bit of a licorice all sorts, but still be good at what you do. That helped me, I believe, eventually get into teams because I could be a second goal kicker for the teams.
We often talk about that sort of early specialization and then giving players that opportunity to develop, especially rugby's a late maturation sport, and all those types of things. Dan, I mean, we'll get into, I guess, a lot of those lessons that you learned from all of the stuff you just explained and how it shapes what you do today. I'd love to know, just a bit more about that. You went from playing to St. Albans College, and then you're playing in the Carlton League, I think it is, and then suddenly you're playing at Loftus for Northern Transvaal. Can you just quickly talk us through what happened there, and was that out of the blue, and how did you deal with that? Because if you haven't played Craven Week, that must have been, how does we talk to young players a lot. How do you deal with the pressure of that, and how did that come about?
Look, that's also an interesting story, because people talk a lot about the new South Africa. Sorry, I'm going back a little bit, and the new South Africa, we all love it. And it's the way, to embrace the country and so on. But when I was standard 5 in my final year in primary school, the Bulls didn't have a Craven Week team that year because of politic reasons, not saying that I would have made it back then, but missed out on that. And then in high school, as I said, wasn't good enough, but kept on believing. And then came to university, and I'll never forget Rudy Hubert, who was involved in the 95 World Cup. He would have coached the Bulls, he would have coached Cardiff and so on. He was our coach, rocking up at Pretoria University. And he said the first night we arrived, he said, all the guys that played Craven Week, you on the right-hand side, all the other guys, you on the left-hand side. And then you had guys that played for Stellarland and Northeastern Cape and Northwestern Cape and Eastern Free State, but they played Craven Week. So, and we had to go and slog it out in the Hostel League to try and make it, which was also, it built a bit of resilience. And I'm going to prove you wrong, that chip on the shoulder, which a lot of people said or will say that I probably had as a player, but, I wasn't the biggest lad and so on. So anyway, that's how it started. And then, as I said, then came under 20 rugby, or after under 20 rugby senior. The trial teams came out, not in it. So I decided, look, it's actually a journey as well, because my dad's youngest brother is 2 years older than me. And he was also studying at Pretoria University. So we jumped in a car. He says, let's go to Harlequins. So, and I always played in Pretoria Junior Rugby Club on Saturdays back in primary school. But so we went to Harlequins, and Harlequins was then competing for the old Toyota Club Championships. So we arrived at Quins on the Tuesday night, and I won't mention the guy's name, but he also sees us there, and he says, listen, the guys the first team and second team are preparing there. The fourths are over on this side. You can hang around there and so on. And I look at my uncle as it is, and I said, listen, don't feel home yet. Let's go to Whistlickers. And we drive to the zoo in Pretoria, get there. Everybody's so welcoming. I know I take a long way to get to what you asked, but arrived there, trained the Tuesday night, trained the Thursday night. As I said, played thirds, played seconds, played first, and things actually happened very quickly. I was 20 then, and then I got picked for a Northern Transvaal B touring team to go and play against Griquas and Stellaland and sort of an in-house tour, and managed to perform quite well on that tour. And then I found myself in the Currie Cup squad for the Bulls. John Williams was still the coach. And again, the story is just arriving at the first training at Loftus. As I said, I knew Loftus inside out, but now you get picked. And back in the day, I can't remember, it was a phone call or something, but how they get a hold of us, or it was your name in the paper and you have to be at Loftus at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock for Tuesday night training. It was still the amateur days. And, there's guys that's my heroes, man, that now suddenly, I'm with. So, walk in and they say, no, sit on this chair, sit on this chair, very welcome, make yourself comfortable, and so on. And geez, thanks, so delighted. And then the next moment, John Williams, 6'9" or 6'8" or whatever he was, the coach, came in and he says, what the hell, who are you and what are you doing on my chair? And like you go, well, didn't you just pick me? And he goes, newcomers are in the next changing room. So back in those days, then you go into the next changing rooms and you hear to listen to the studs and everything when the guys walk out to the pitch, and that's your cue then to walk after them, So it wasn't the all welcoming as what you get now. But then, benched for Northern Transvaal. My first game was actually, again, we played Northern Natal or something in a Lion Cup game, as it was back in the day. And I made my debut in Vryheid for the Bulls. And then first game at Loftus, I was on the bench against Western Transvaal. And back in those days, it was 2 guys on the bench. So you had a prop that could play hooker and a little bit of anything else in the pack. And then you had a scrum half that could play a little bit of anything in the back. So myself and Willie Hills, he obviously also a guy that ended up playing for South Africa and so on. We were the 2 guys that benched for that year, him as a forward and me as a back. And my first game, I replaced Dion Oosthuizen on the right wing against Western Transvaal. And then that was back in 91 or 92. And then things just developed. And then actually at St. This is now a different story, but at Centurion Park back in early 96, or it was, a reporter just came to me and said, rugby has now gone professional. Would you like to go and play somewhere else? So look, it's a long journey, but that's how my thing in Northern Transvaal started. And then I played 92, 93, 94. Was lucky enough to be with the Bulls. And then 95 again, suddenly I wasn't in the squad. Back in those days, as I say, we played I think it was the Mnet Night Series where we played against Samoa and the other unions at Ellis Park. And I'm in that side, and then the Currie Cup squad comes out on the Monday in 95, and then suddenly not in the team. So I advise players a lot these days on not to do what I did, but there's nothing that I did that they can do now, because then wasn't picked. So on the Wednesday, I jumped on a plane and I came to play county cricket in England. And I said, okay, rugby is not for me. So went over to England, played county or minor counties for Shropshire. And then September went back home and straight away was back in rugby and cricket. So look, there's so many stories. Once you ask questions,
you mentioned you started playing back in the day when rugby just became professional.
Yeah.
So if you can take us through that time, what changed? Because we had a few guests on here as well that spoke about it. And, in that transition period, it was, all of a sudden you were pro. It was David James and from Wales. And he spoke about, okay, rugby's professional now. Okay, and guys started going to gym, you're getting paid. But what was the big difference? How did you experience that transition from amateur to professional? Because 95 to 2000, that was the key period, where rugby players became professional or were seen as professional rugby players. So what changed in that period compared to the amateur game?
Goodrow, to be honest with you, in my experience, not a lot changed. I just wanted to play rugby, from a young age, and luckily enough, then it happened. But then, as I said, after the World Cup in '95, I was still with Northern Transvaal, still playing club rugby there. But then I was approached by a guy, Henk Steenkamp, who was a reporter at the time, and so on, and said it was actually at a cricket game that I played at Centurion, and he came to me and he says, "Listen, rugby has now gone professional. You struggling, you in and out of the Northern Transvaal side. James Stoffberg is taking over. There's now 14 provinces that's going to start. Would you be interested in moving to one of the small provinces and be part of the Currie Cup where you play week in, week out?" So, and then we were a bunch. We were probably 10 guys, I would say, that all was in that mix of playing Northern Transvaal B, as it was at the time, but feel we might be good enough to play against the big dogs. And then was lucky enough. That's how I ended up Mpumalanga. And Willem Strauss, who's now the president of the Bulls, he was a young guy then, as CEO of Mpumalanga. And we signed quite a few. Chaka Willemse was our captain. And we were basically quite a few Northern Transvaal guys that went over to Mpumalanga, played in the 96 Currie Cup. I signed for 3 years, but back then, I'm not shy to share it, but I think my contract was 24,000 a year for 3 years. So, and I drove to Witbank. So it wasn't, but that for me, we trained Tuesdays, Thursdays. We had an extra day training, and then we played Saturdays. So my experience from professional rugby was just that there was 14 provinces. So suddenly we all had a chance to compete at the same level rather than, at a lower level. And then where it changed for me was when I got selected out of Mpumalanga for the 97 tour team at the end of the year under Nick Mallet, the very successful Springbok team under him. And then through that, went to Western Province in 98. And that's probably when I realized the difference in professionalism in rugby, and training, playing, video analysis, all of that, which, for me to play for Pumas at the start, to be honest with you, was just an extension of playing club rugby just at a higher level.
Dan, I'm fascinated to know, because you went from there, you just mentioned the Springboks, I'd love to, and you mentioned Joost van der Westhuizen a couple of times already, and, he's probably regarded as one of the greatest players of all time. Sonny, you're in that Springbok. Hey, I mean, there's probably loads you can talk about from around your Springbok journey, your South African journey. I'm intrigued from a coach's point of view. Did you learn, just quickly, I guess this is my sort of geeky type question. Did you learn more from the things that didn't go well for you as a player, and in that experience, and rather than the things that did do that, than the things that coaches did well with you?
100%, and it's almost that every training counts. And it's a phrase that I use now, every rep in training counts. And that was, I got picked out of the blue for that 97 tour. And there's a few stories around that as well. But then realized, geez, walking into Sandton Sun, I introduced myself to the players. First player that I introduced myself was James Small. And we became great friends on the tour. Probably picked the wrong guy. to meet first. But I introduced myself. I introduced myself to Nick Mallet. I didn't know him. I've never spoken a word to him. And then you were in the limelight. And you had to, and the different characters and so on. And I then spent 4 weeks or it was 3 weeks on tour. We had a week in Joburg, and then 2 weeks abroad before I managed to play my first game. And back then it was midweek games, and it was against the French Barbarians that I managed to get a cap, and a guy like Henry Honeyball, because my personality was also always, joking, sometimes not knowing when to be serious. That's now what I try to educate players on. You've got to be that, you've got to have that personality, but know when to be serious as well. And then Henry Honeyball came to me in the change room, and, he's not a man of many words, but he said, now talking is over. And you just realize, geez, you have to perform today, But the biggest lesson I learned from being in that environment is you with special people that's got a real purpose. You're playing for your country, which is a real privilege that nobody else or very few people at that time, in the history got. So every training, everything that you do is under the microscope, and you've got to make the most of it.
We've been really privileged. We've had quite a few really exceptional guests on, and Ali Williams just sprung to mind, the All Black second row, when you were talking, because you what I see with young players today quite often, and I think it's a bit of a generation thing as well, is people are a bit fearful sometimes to introduce themselves or have this adult relationship with their coaches. And one of the things that G and I speak about quite often is, as a young player, it's really important, and I know when we were brought up, you perhaps some basic things like you'd go and shake somebody's hand, you'd look them in the eye, you'd greet somebody properly, you'd stand up as somebody comes into the room, you'd greet them. And quite often that doesn't happen now. And I think it's because of a bit of a fear thing. But what you described there, going up and introducing yourself to the coach, that could be seen as quite bold, but it's actually comes through. Ali Williams, he would go and speak to his coaches as equals, not in a disrespectful way. And it's really quite one of these sort of lessons that's coming through from quite a few of our guests. They'd be respectful, but not fearful. It's really interesting. Did you have the same relationship with all of your coaches, like Harry Viljoen and Andre Margraaf and Nick Mallet? Was that just just on that?
Look, I had different relationships with coaches, and that's, again, I'm not proud of some of the things that I did and towards coaches. As I say, I probably had a chip on my shoulder, and I was the best guy probably when I was picked, and I was the worst guy when I wasn't picked. It sort of took me 2 days or so, and that didn't help me. But I certainly think if I have to talk to coaches now, they could see the value, and I'm meeting up with, it's probably the one thing of getting older is we all become more relaxed and so on. And the coaches that I meet now, coaches that would have coached me in the past, we've got great relationship, and now the honesty and the truth and so on is there. And that was just always something in the old era, if I can call it that way, that was probably missing from a coach's point of view. I think that honesty was always there from a player's point of view and want to know what must I do to get in the team. But coaches didn't have that confidence or that openness towards players, and I can honestly say in my career, the two coaches, cricket, the best coach that I've ever had was a guy called Keith Medlicott, played for England and coached the Titans and so on. And he had that, he would drop me more than anybody else, but you always knew where you stood. And Alan Solomons was the same when I moved to Western Province. And there wasn't a lot that was there, but I felt from my side, I always tried to approach the coaches in that way. Some liked it, and others didn't, but for me, honesty and being loyal is two attributes that I feel very strong about. And I just want guys to treat me the same in that respect, So, but because there was a story about Nick Mallet, as I said, I've never met him and so on, and then introduced myself to him in '97, and then we were on our first team meeting, and Nick said, "Listen, everybody here, is in line to be picked for Saturday for the test match, and so on, and I remember walking out of the room, and I made sure that I'm just behind Nick, and he still jokes about it, and I walked behind and I said to or to one of the guys, but I make sure that I speak loud enough, and I said, geez, it's great that I come on this tour as the number 3 scrum half, but I've got a real shot at playing on Saturday. I'm going to give it everything now. And then, I became, I think he made me captain of the baggage or something on the tour, but he's had that personality. With him, you could have banter and so on. So back to your question, it probably goes in a roundabout way, but I do feel it had to come from players back then. And that's the big thing that I think changed now. I think there's a lot more openness about coaches. If you take Rassie as example, if you take Farrell as example here in Ireland, players know when they're going to play, what they have to do. They get looked after a lot better than what we probably used to in the past, mentally and physically. There was just, if you were dropped, you were just dropped, and you had to find your way back. There was no explanations back then.
When you were picked, you were the best player, but when you weren't picked, you were the worst player. So you've created this academy called Rugby Academy Ireland. So now you are mentoring players. You created a different pathway for players, and it's a new generation of players. They're different to the way you were and I was and Ben. We all come from different generations. We were brought up differently, and that has its own challenges itself. But how do you tell players now today, okay, you got dropped or you didn't get picked? How do they have to deal with it? What processes or frameworks do you share with them to help them to overcome those mental obstacles? Because I've been in teams too. When players don't get picked, they disrupt the team. I won't mention his name, but as I remember, a certain player wasn't picked for the final at Toulouse in 2012, and that whole week he just rushed and shot out of line with his heat shield and tried to annihilate players, which was probably risky because players could have been injured. So what advice do you give to youngsters now? And let's also be honest, some of the youngsters mentally are a bit fragile. And I'm not saying this to how can I say, look down on them, because just conditions are different, situations are different, the way they live today is different. So in order to build that resilience is a bit more challenging. So what advice do you give to youngsters when they not get picked? And also when they are picked, how should they be treating their teammates?
Gutro, it's a very difficult question, and I think I'm still learning on that. The only advice that I give them is don't be like I was, because I know that wasn't helpful, So, but it is, you've got a role to fulfill. Rugby, I think, has changed again in that respect. It's not a 15-man game; it's a 23-man game, and it is a squad game. Players. To prolong their careers and so on. Even if you don't play this week, you're going to play next week. So it's just to have those honest conversations and always try and get better what you're good at. I think as players, we always, as coaches, we look at the weaknesses of players. But and this advice I probably got when I was just starting out my career is I couldn't hit a cover drive in cricket, but I could hook and I could cut. So, and that's the things that got me into a team, just to use as an example. So keep practicing your strength while working on your weaknesses. Too many guys, I feel, go overboard and they try and improve their weaknesses and they never realize what got them in the team. And ask the coach that, what is my attribute? And it's interesting now, as I said, from coaches that I've linked up with again, like Gert Smal and so on, that would have coached me back in the day. And if they could only say back then what was the contribution that I made to the team, I think my whole attitude would have been a lot different. So for me, back again, I think the player needs to take onus to go and ask the coach, what is my attributes in this team? How do you see me? What can I perform in? What is your vision for me? And then it will be a lot more easy to understand and then to build. But that resilience that you speak about, I've got young kids, and I say to my wife as well, how do we build that resilience? It is a difficult thing to get. I don't know if it's coachable or not, but certainly be a nice guy, because the one thing as well that I believe in now is you pick the person before the player. The player you can coach, but if he's not the right person for the team, then you're going to struggle. So that's the advice that I try to give to players: is be a good guy that can fit into the environment. And everybody's not going to, you can see it still in the pro game, everybody's not going to fit into the right environment. And styles of play, I'm a running fly half or a running scrum half, but then I get contracted to go and play, say argument, it is changing, but say argument to go and play for the Bulls. Back in the day when they need a 10 that can kick the length of the pitch, and they want a physical 9 as a force loose forward. That's not going to suit my style. So I have to move to where it's going to suit my style, to a Mpumalanga or to a Western Province where you get 30% ball. And I think that can be in all positions. So you've got to go and find what is your characteristics, what is your strengths, and then go to a coach that play that way. Ben and myself off air discussed, Wayne Smith. So if you're a player, that type of player, and you're going to go and play in a structured system where we just play off 9 and we just play field position and so on, that's not going to be enjoyable, and you're probably not going to survive in the team. So have those open conversations and know where your skill sets is going to come to the fore the best.
Dan, there's so much there. G and I talk about amplifying your strengths, doing a player audit, working out what you're good at, and then amplifying those strengths, and exactly what you spoke about there. And it's I guess, music to our ears. And it's also, I was going to ask about the academy, and I know that I coach. When I coach, I reckon at least half of it is about I'm trying to coach things that to people to do better, the things that I did really badly. And one of them was communication with my coaches, because I was very much like, you don't speak until you're spoken to. That's how I was brought up almost. And so I really struggled with the communication with coaches. I just kept my head down, and obviously it's different in different environments. You touched on the cricket. You spoke about sort of the cover drive, and and that analogy as well. But your cricket, I think I read that you played the same week. You played a first class cricket match, and then on the Friday you played Super Rugby against the Hurricanes or something like that. It's that when people hear that now, listening to this, a younger generation, they'll be like, "What? You played first class cricket and you played against the Hurricanes in professional rugby and Super Rugby in the same week? How is that even possible?" I mean, when I think of dual internationals, I think of people like Jeff Wilson as well. You probably caught up with him down the years, but talk to us about quickly how that worked that week. And can you even remember what the Hurricanes were? Not a bad outfit at that stage either. You probably came up against Lomu or somebody like that as well.
Yeah, but look, that's why, the time on feet thing of S&C coaches, I don't totally get, because I was driving from rugby practice to cricket practice and so on. Yeah, and that was, we played, the cricket season sort of started in September and finished in sort of April. And then the rugby season, pre-season started sort of in February or in January. Well, when Super Rugby started, Currie Cup, it was February, March, and then finished in September, October with the Currie Cup final. But in that particular week, we played a one-day cricket final against Transvaal, as it was at the Bullring on the Wanderers. And Ken Rutherford, the New Zealand skipper at the time. He was captaining Transvaal. So I played that game on the Wednesday night. And then on the Friday night, I started for the Bulls against the Hurricanes at Loftus. And the Hurricanes then, they had Jason Spice at scrum half, Orwell at fly half, Alama Eremia, Jonah Lomo, Christian Cullen, I think just Tana Umaga.
Yeah, fully loaded backline.
So,
that was insane.
They weren't a slouch. They weren't a slouch team. But thinking back to it now, I can't remember how I did it. But obviously, back in those days, if you miss a training session, you weren't picked. And it's just, that's why I say the coaches at the time that I had there, they were understanding of it still. But that was, I think I was the last person that could have done that. And with the Titans and the Bulls, or Mpumalanga, I was playing for the Titans and Currie Cup for Mpumalanga. That was a bit of a drive. And then when I moved to Western Province, I was actually playing for Kraaifontein Club. And the reason why I played for Kraaifontein is it's a great community. But the other reason was they played cricket in Boland and rugby in Western Province. So I managed to play rugby for Western Province and cricket for Boland until Alan Solomons one day came to me and said, listen, you're not going to go further. You have to make a choice now. And that's probably when I decided on rugby. Even the Nick Mallet thing, that's when I knew that rugby will take over, because when I got selected for the Springboks, I had a cricket game on, and I remember phoning him and saying, can I play the cricket game before meeting up on the Sunday? And he says, well, you can, but you might never play for the Springboks if you break a finger or whatever like that. So that was an easy decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so that week was surreal. It was really surreal, but I'm so glad it happened. And like I say, I was just that kind of guy that if I'm involved, I just wanted to be involved, and that's probably why I took it so hard when I wasn't involved.
Dan, I just want to ask you a question because, Ben, he helps a lot of young players and athletes as well. And I do the same, in our different communities. But I think sometimes the younger rugby players, though, they have this misconception of what it takes to really play at the highest level. So in your opinion, what does rugby players need right now? What are the attributes that they required to have in order to make it shift into a professional level? Because obviously what you guys are doing with Rugby Academy Ireland, you're creating a different pathway, and I think it's kind of great. If you listen to your story, you didn't have that typical pathway like other guys did. You had to really go through trial games and eventually you got your opportunity. And I think it's great what you guys are doing, creating a place and sort of an academy where players can have a different pathway to become, hopefully, one day become professional players. So as a coach that is helping these players and mentoring them, what are you drilling into them in terms of what are the attributes and the skill sets that you need if you want to play at the highest level?
For me, I think it's, and it's again a great question, Gutro, and but it's perseverance. For me, I think it's you aren't. It is not a straight line. It is a rocky road, and that's why we opened the academy, because the structures in Ireland, structures over the world is so good. But how many good players, we've all seen them, how many good players are around that just didn't have that opportunity, or they didn't have that coach at that particular time, that picked you or didn't pick you. So we try to create that other pathway, and you might be the best player in Toulouse, or you might not be the best player in Toulouse as a youngster coming up, or in Leinster, but not playing for Leinster or for Toulouse or whoever, Stormers or whatever it is, that doesn't say that you can't make it somewhere else. I think that's the thing that rugby has changed again, and it's now very open. So, but you must be willing. You must be willing to go on that journey. You must be willing to take advice, and you must then graft to make it happen. Because if you go to 3 or 4 different environments, then you've got to ask yourself the question, why is it not working? So for me, it is perseverance. Keep going, believe in yourself, but there's a difference between believing and doing. So you have to put in the hard yards. You have to, if you're a scrum half, for me, you have to go at least outside of training and stuff, 600 passes a week, 100 box kicks a week, or whatever it is. Work on your skill set that's required. And it's almost that old cliche of saying that if you're not the number one, you must train to be the number one, or train harder than the number one. So I guess that's what I'm trying to install to players. Every coach is going to be different, why they pick you, why they didn't pick you, and so on. But at the end of the day, if you keep rocking up, if you're not picked, you make sure that you're there on a Saturday and, sir, can I carry the water bottles? Sir, is there anything, can I do this for you or do that for the team? Not just stay away because you're not in the team. Injured, the same. I'm injured. Does that mean you don't go and travel with the team on the Saturday? You've got a role to fulfill. You can be the video man for the game. So be involved, be present, persevere, and just work hard at your skill.
Dan, it's really interesting. I mean, when I think of your journey, and like, jump in anytime and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're sort of pretty unheralded as far as like South African coaches go. You got one cap, I think, in 2000 off the bench against, and maybe we'll hear a bit more about your debut, but you were maybe on the bench another 12, 13 times. In modern rugby, you would have come on, you would have been used, but as you said, there was, and you were behind Joost, I think, for all of those caps, or most of those caps. But and then you've gone to Ireland, and like, you've been really integral to the Leinster setup, which has been really successful in Europe for a long period of time. But that's not really well publicized or known about. Can you give us a bit of insight into the work you've done in Ireland and with Leinster and some of those sort of success stories? I know you've been coaching players and coaches. It'd be really useful for all of us, and I'd love to just know a bit more about that.
Yeah, look, it's a journey in itself again, just to not bore you, but to tell you how I ended up in Ireland is, again, game when, back in, it was toured with South Africa in 2000, played in 2001, was Currie Cup captain of Western Province in 2001, and then contract came to an end in October, but never got told that, they're not going to extend my contract. I was 30 at the time, so still young. I've made the decision at 28 just to play rugby, not to play cricket and rugby. And then suddenly came October, and I didn't get a contract. Now, my own fault. I was probably the most marketable, not being arrogant, but probably the most marketable guy at a certain time in South African sport. But I've never had an agent because I just wanted to jaw. The money wasn't any, I'm not money driven or anything like that, which sometimes create other conversations in family life and so on.
Yeah.
But so, and then I somehow got a phone call, would you come over to Bristol, during the autumn internationals. Pishore was the scrum half in Bristol, but Argentina played autumn internationals, and can you come over for 4 weeks? Went over for 4 weeks to try and find out, what am I going to do now in life? Sport is now, it's at that crossroads. Didn't get a contract with Western Province. At the time, I didn't feel like I could go back to a smaller union after all the knowledge. I didn't want to be that person anymore that questions and challenges and so on, everything. And then while I was there, a guy came and said, but why don't you come and coach in Ireland? Be a player coach in one of the amateur clubs in Ireland. And Kevin Putt, who I would have played a lot against. Putty was then in Ireland playing for Terranea. And I phoned him and I said, look, what do you think? And he said, listen, Ireland's a good spot. Come over for a year, see where it takes you and so on. So that's how I ended up in Ireland in a place called Carlow Country Club that was in All Ireland Division 1 at the time. Spent 2 years there, then came to Dublin to Clontarf, which is a main top club here. And then through that started working for Leinster as a coach and player development officer. Leinster became professional, I would say, 10 years later than what the game gone professional, in probably 2004, around there. They had community or club community officers, still have, and that's probably their success. They've got 70 club community officers that express the brand and express the way they want to play and how they coach and so on in the clubs, so players coming through just know the system and so on, or know the skill sets required. So, but I worked for Leinster then for 11 years in coach and player development. So I was responsible in a certain area for getting coaches qualified. If you're a mini coach, you have to have a mini qualification. If you're a youth coach, you have to have a youth qualification. So not superimposing. And we used the phrase back in the day, will Joe Schmidt or it was Heineke Meyer or whoever coach you could think of, because he's successful at international level, will he be a good under-10s coach? Or can you be the best under-10s coach that there is, So yeah, coach development and then player development. So coached the Leinster under-18 club team and coached the ladies, coached the under-19s, the 20s, Ireland under-18s, students. So, but I came over to Ireland to be a professional coach. And then when started working for Leinster, or after 2 or 3 years, I realized youth development is my passion. And I really want to go that route and give the players the advice, change of position, your skill set, your attributes, your character. You might not be this, but why don't you try that position? And, if you're willing, we're willing to coach you through that and so on. But Leinster itself made a big change in their way of coaching. Back in 2007, 2008, we worked with Chelsea Football Club around, the how to coach rather than the what to coach. And that phrase in itself was a massive change within Irish rugby and Leinster rugby specifically. So, our job
it's
titles
funny you
changed.
mentioned that. I was, Dan, I was part of that conversation actually at that time. I'd forgotten about that. There was a guy called Michael Ayres.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, a guy called Michael Ayres, and he came over.
Yes, Michael Ayres, yes, from Chelsea, yes.
Yeah, we did that work.
There's a lot of different parts in that, but that, and since Leinster changed that, and they've just been very true to that. So now, they've got the domestic game different from the pro game, where a lot of clubs still, the pro coach comes in and he tries to filter everything through to the under 16s, but he might be gone in 2 years and then a new guy comes in. So what Leinster did and still do is they've got a philosophy of we coach everybody, everything until they go into the academy or until they become a professional player and so on. And then it will be easy. Doesn't matter what coach comes, that the players will be able to adapt to that because they've been coached the how rather than the what.
Dan, I just want to jump in just more of a lighter note here. That's great information, and I do believe the Irish system, that's great. Would actually like to get some more insights on that. But I wrote down a question here because I think the new generation won't know what this means, a dirt tracker. I experienced what a dirt tracker is back in the day when I remember my first tour. I wasn't playing and I was a dirt tracker. But before I give my version, can you tell me how did it feel dirt tracking on those tours back in the day?
Jeez, good try. That is a great phrase, because you get to go to places where other people don't want to go to, and that's playing. You've got to play the Tucumán game, who nobody wants to play in Argentina, where they can play the Buenos Aires game, which is great. And no, the dirt tracker is, there was the old saying, and I think I still use it. Die span is nog nie gekis nie. Where the team hasn't been selected yet, but everybody knows it actually has, and then you're just part of that second or third tier group. And my job as a dirt tracker was that I was in charge of the Kontiki. I had to keep discipline in the Kontikis and so on. And like I say, you're helping the baggage master, and you're helping the manager, and you've still got to perform as well. You probably have to perform better because you want to try and get into the A team. Famous, and it will never happen now, but on that 97 tour, Franco Smith and myself was roommates, and we were on the bench for, I think, 4 of the 5 tests or so on. But in Scotland specifically, we played in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And Nick Mallet asked us as the dirt trackers or so on, listen, can you please go down and mingle with the supporters? This is on the Friday night before the test. Can you please go down and mingle with the supporters so that they don't be too rowdy and so on? The test team needs a rest. The 15 players need to sleep. And you end up having probably a beer with the guys, where nowadays...
a few beers. It's not just one beer, it's a few beers.
That will never happen. When I started off with the Blue Bulls, the dirt tracker on that trip, Adrian Richter was a captain. And if you're a newbie or you're not in the team, you had to drink 3 beers with him on a Friday night, because he wanted to get to know you and stuff like that. So the dirt trackers had to have you had to play well. You went to all the places where other people didn't want to go, and your liver was different at the end of the tour than before the tour.
So then, just given back then when I was still playing, the dirt trackers had a very important role because, like you just mentioned, they had to train really hard to prepare the team, so to give them the best possible opposition. And also there's that ego. Now, if you're running attacking plays of the opposition, you want to try and score a try against the team that's playing on a weekend. That was the best possible preparation. And we trained hard. We did extra fitness, lots of it.
Yeah.
But we couldn't wait for that Friday night. The Friday night was when the reward kicked in. And I would remember back then the Springbok manager would give the credit card to one of the leaders and say, right, take the boys out, you guys go have a good meal. I remember that in 2004, I think it was Bob Skins that was there, was a few other players, and we had a few good beers. It was so rewarding. We felt like, listen here, we're finally being valued for our efforts in the week. That reward, that dirt tracker dinner. But sometimes the dirt tracker sessions would get a bit hectic, but it kind of became this thing. The next day at breakfast, the guys that are playing, they wanted to hear what happened. What did you guys do? Where did you guys go? What did you get up to? So that was their way also to kind of just have a good laugh. And we weren't going into detail.
No, but to put the pressure off sessions. Them. And I think that was very true. And what you said there, you as a dirt tracker, you had to know your own playbook, because as you know, coaches, if you don't know your detail, then there's no chance they might give you a chance. But then at the same time, on a Tuesday's training, you also had to know the Wallaby playbook, or you had to know the French playbook, So you had to study probably double, because you had to do that against the team so that they know what's coming on Saturday. So no, it was very enjoyable, but it wasn't. It was difficult.
Yeah, I can tell you this: the dirt trackers are done. They no longer exist in professional rugby, because with the way players are training and players that can pull out in a warm up in the game, you can't afford that anymore. So yeah,
but it's sad in the sense as well. Goodrow, I spoke before about when I started playing Currie Cup, and you go to Loftus or you go to Newlands, and then the 20s is playing, and then the Bs are playing, and then the Currie Cup team is playing, because where does the players now, I remember speaking to Chris Rousseau last year when the Bulls were here, where does the big squad now get that opportunity to play? They only train, so where do you create opportunity for them to play? And you get players now, they 3 years at a union and they hardly, or they might not have played 5 games. And for me, there's something wrong in the system in that, I think. I would like to think I was a great tourist, tried to make the most of it, whether I played or not. And look, I think it's still so valuable for young guys and, to experience that.
Dan, just finally, I guess there's so much you did packed into a life, playing with cricket and with rugby, professional career, and then a coaching career now. What's your big takeaways that you've taken into the job that you're doing now, in the role that you play now within your academy? What's the, if there's 1 or 2 takeaways, what's your big final takeaways that you can give to our listeners?
For me, it's to give back and try and educate the players on lessons learned, and whether that was good or bad, but really try. The game has changed. The society have changed. As I say, there's certain things that you just can't get away with anymore, that we could get away with or so on. So you have to do the right thing for long periods of time, and you've got to give yourself the best opportunity. There's so much competition out there. The world is open to rugby. So you've got to give yourself the best opportunity to succeed. And whatever that takes, you've got to make sure that you can do that, So just with Rugby Academy Ireland now, we had a guy from Peru, for instance, last year, and his aim is to play World Cup for Chile. So how do we get him on the right path, and we have 11, 12 different nationalities every year. We're starting now next week with our full 9-month program, and we've got 25 or 24 players joining 12 different nationalities. So how do I advise and create pathways for them to succeed? And that's through everything that we chatted. It's not a fix of you come to us and tomorrow you're going to be a professional player. It's learning through that journey. Our education around how do you treat your body, how do you treat your sleep, how do you treat nutrition, how do you practice, how do you perform playing every week, how do you perform training every day? Because the phrase that I use for the guys is, you never know who's watching, and I've got video evidence of that, funnily enough. Like one guy that was with us a couple of years back played a Sunday afternoon game for the seconds, didn't really think much about it, although he thought he might have should have played first. But looking on the video evidence of the game, one of the Leinster under 18 coaches was walking his dog next to the field. Now, you play a good game there, or you do something special there, that guy's going to ask afterwards, who was that?
Yeah.
Why is he playing in your B team?
It's a good lesson.
And that happens the same at training. You might be training. You never know who's chatting to who on the sideline. And there's just something that, and it's happened with me as a coach, where you just see something in a player and, geez, I want to find out a bit more about him or whatever. So for me, it's trying to put your best foot forward most of the time.
That's brilliant.
And I think the world is then your oyster, because everybody doesn't have. We always think of professional rugby. You have to play for Toulouse or you have to play for Leinster, but you take it. There's professional leagues all over the world now, and the sense of travel, the sense of going to explore all of that. You can do that now being a rugby player. So make the most of your opportunity, take advice, and then work hard at it.
Brilliant advice.
Just want to say thanks for taking the time, and well done on what you're doing in Ireland as well with the Rugby Academy Ireland. And for those of you who are listening, if you're not on the pathway at the moment, you know, you can always reach out to Dan and his team and see what they can do for you. You guys' roster, I think, is quite full already for the new season. But we'll add your guys' website in the show notes so people can access it. And we're really looking forward to following your guys' progress, and looking forward to hear some of those success stories of the players that are working hard. And but guys, as you guys know, myself and Ben, we have launched our own private communities on School. So you can just DM us the words school or community on our social media pages on Instagram, and we'll send you the link. That's a great opportunity for you guys to connect with us as well. And we're in the process of launching our community for lessons from the game. But most importantly, to continue to grow the show and get amazing guests like Dan on here, we need you to keep on following, liking, and subscribing. But most importantly, if you have any questions or any comments, please leave them on Spotify or on YouTube. All right, guys, I want to thank you guys for an unbelievable episode. Yes, Dan, any last things you want to add?
Sorry,
before we
man.
go?
Yeah, no, I just want to say cricket days aren't over yet. I'm captaining the Ireland over 50s against New Zealand on Friday.
Oh, awesome.
So the rugby and cricket still
Nice.
works together. But no, thanks a lot for having me on the show. And as I say, you know, if players want to know more about Rugby Academy Ireland, as you say, please follow us and so on. And we really try to make a difference in not just rugby, but in people's lives as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Dan.